Hey, what's up everyone? How's it going? This is Watch, and in this video we'll be doing a direct head-to-head tablet comparison between the Dell Venue 8, this is the 7000 series of Dell's lineup in tablets, versus one of the most popular miniature tablets that you can get out there, the iPad Mini 2. Now, the iPad Mini 3 is also very applicable to this comparison because there's very little difference, virtually identical to the Mini 2 that I have, with the minor exception that it has the Touch ID system, which won't really factor too much into this comparison. So if you're interested in seeing how these two tablets compare against each other, I think both these tablets are two of the most sleekest miniature tablets that you can get in the marketplace, and let's go ahead and see which one has the most to offer. Now, the first thing that we're going to take a look at is the overall physical dimensions between these two compact tablets. Now, the Dell Venue 8 7840, as you can see over here, side by side, is a little bit taller than the iPad Mini, measuring about 215.9 millimeters, but it is a little bit narrower than the iPad Mini, measuring only about 124.2 millimeters. Now, the Venue 8 is probably one of the thinnest tablets in the marketplace. It only measures about 6 millimeters versus the 7.5 millimeter of the iPad Mini. And furthermore, it's also one of the lightest tablets available at around 305 grams versus about 331 grams on the iPad. Now, in terms of finish and build quality, I think the Venue 8 definitely delivers of what you would expect from a really premium grade tablet device, and certainly up to the level of what you would expect from any iPad. And I think both of them have a great overall fit and finish and offer a fantastic build quality and are pretty comfortable in the hand. The only problem with the Dell is the fact that since it doesn't have any bezels really at the top portions of the screen, you really have an awkward time trying to figure out the best way to hold it, because obviously you can hold it at the bottom portion of the screen, but that portion is where the speaker is, and if you're listening to any audio, you're potentially blocking the sound out of that. So there's really no good way to hold the Dell tablet, versus the iPad still has a little bit of bezels, but I do like the fact that you don't have any bezels on the Dell. It definitely makes the design really sleek and futuristic, but there's a trade-off in terms of ergonomics, unfortunately. Now, moving forward, both of these devices have really fantastic displays. In terms of size, we have 8.4 inches on the Dell and about 7.9 inches on the iPad. Now, in terms of the screen to body ratio, we do have a larger screen on the Dell, plus it doesn't have as thick bezels, so we do have a larger ratio of 76.3% screen to body ratio versus 71.7% on the iPad. Now, in terms of overall resolution, we do have the Retina display in our iPad, which has a native resolution of 2048 by 5036, and that has a PPI count of 324. The Dell Venue has a very nice and high resolution of 2560 by 1600, which has a higher PPI count of about 359, making it one of the most dense displays that you can get in any device, especially in this category. And in terms of the overall kind of screen quality, we have an organic LED display on the Dell versus a standard LED IPS display on the iPad, and both do a great job of rendering out colors. Obviously, in terms of black levels, the OLED would deliver deeper, more richer blacks, and I think in terms of overall color reproduction, they're both kind of on par with each other. The only limitation of an OLED screen versus LED backlight that's in the iPad, which is overall going to deliver a brighter image, especially if you're going to use these tablets in an outdoor, brightly lit sunlit condition, where you'll find that the OLED screen can't really match up to the luminosity you get on the iPad. Now, next, one of the things that I do like about the Dell Venue 8 is the fact that it has an excellent front-facing speaker system. It's a stereo speaker system, and it uses max audio technology to kind of enhance the frequency response of the sound. So we're going to take a listen to both speakers, and you can determine which sounds better to you. Now, looking at the internal specifications of both these devices, we can see that we have an Intel Atom quad-core CPU that's clocking about 2.3 gigahertz on the Venue 8. We also have 2 gigabytes of RAM, which is double the amount that you get on the iPad, but we have a dual-core A7 chip that's clocking about 1.3 gigahertz. Now, in most scenarios, these processors are quite comparable against each other, but if we evaluate the Geekbench 3 results, we can definitely see that in terms of single-core applications, that Apple A7 chip chip is still a great processor. It's getting an overall higher score than we get on that Intel Atom processor on the Dell Venue. But in terms of multi-core processing, since we have more cores to play with on the Dell, we have a better overall score. But both of these devices are going to deliver a pretty smooth and responsive experience with zero lag and very little hiccups throughout your day-to-day use. Now, funny enough, in terms of gaming, they're both using a very similar, in fact, the exact same GPU architecture. They're using the PowerVR G6 430 quad-core graphics, and in terms of real-life gaming performance, since the Dell has a little bit more pixels to play with, the GPU is going to struggle a bit more compared to the iPad, which generally doesn't have as many frame drops, and it delivers a little bit more smoother gaming experience, especially on more graphically intensive titles, and there's really no big issues with the Dell, but it's certainly not as smooth and as fluid as the gaming experience you get on the iPad mini. And one of the cool things about the Dell Venue 8 is that you can actually, in fact, upgrade the internal memory up to 512 gigabytes because it does have a micro SD expansion slot at the side of the device, versus on the iPad, you kind of have to stick to the model that you selected, which typically are configurable to 16, 64, and 128 gigabytes. Now, continuing forward, in terms of the camera specifications, the Dell Venue 8 has a 2 megapixel front-facing camera versus the iPad mini has the standard 1.2 megapixel sensor, and they both kind of deliver very similar image quality, both in terms of stills and video. When we take a look at the rear-facing cameras, here's where things get a little bit different. The Dell Venue 8 actually has 3 cameras that you can see at the back. One is your standard 8 megapixel sensor for stills and 1080p video, and we have 2 other 3D cameras, which are 720p in terms of resolution on each camera, and they use a technology called a RealSense, which is basically an analyzing tool and software that can measure the distance between different objects in your image, so it can sense depth, and with that you can basically do selective focusing after you've taken an image, and you can also do some kind of gimmicky things where you can measure the distances between objects. The only catch is it only works to about 3 to 16 feet. In terms of raw image quality, when we're taking a look at these stills capabilities, I think both of these really deliver a very similar looking image in terms of clarity and color rendition. I think generally speaking, even though we have more pixels to play with, 8 megapixels on the Dell, if you're not in any kind of perfect lighting condition, you're not going to see any kind of advantage. Both of them are fairly poor in terms of low light performance, and the same thing goes for video as we've seen in the photos. So definitely very similar overall camera qualities, even though the specifications seem to say otherwise. Now, the very last thing that we're going to talk about is the overall battery performance of both these two tablets. Now, I have to say both of them performed exceptionally well in terms of real-world web browsing tests, and on average, the iPad mini gets around 10 hours, and the Dell Venue 8 on average gets around 10 to 15% better battery performance, up to 11.5 to 12 hours based on my web browsing and general use experience. And of course, battery life fluctuates here and there, but on average, my model of the Dell Venue 8 seemed to perform a little bit better than the iPad mini when it comes to battery life. But on that, guys, that's really it. If you have any specific questions about anything I talked about, please make sure to leave that on a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think of the overall comparison. Which small compact tablet would you go for? I think the Dell Venue 8 7000 series has definitely a lot to offer. If nothing else, it looks really good compared to most other Android tablets, but it comes with a heftier price tag than most of the tablets in its category, especially when it comes to Android tablets. But it's very competitive in terms of what the iPad has to offer. Again, I'd love to hear all your thoughts and opinions. Thanks so much for watching this video, and we'll see you later. Take care.